In terms of the Christians, right, I obviously spoke about new atheism last week, and I stated that from what I could see, this was really an opinion piece, a bit like the New York Times does. Came from the blog, the idea for the segment in the video, and that was how Islam killed new atheism, right? Not Christianity. But if you can actually watch the video, I don't really mention Christianity a whole lot. What I do say is that, Muslims will claim, and it is true, that we have objective morality. And I said that Christians would also claim that, as would Jews, even though their theology is a bit wonky. They would claim that they have objective morality. Now, whether they do is another question, but they would claim that. So therefore, there's a sort of framework from which we can argue upon, right? That's really the only time I mentioned Christianity. And yet, the Christians still went up in arms and were flooding the comments with all of their usual talking points. Now, I just want to state, first and foremost, that I don't have a problem with any of the Christians, frankly, okay? I have many Christian friends, and if anything, I would rather have a country full of Christians than a country full of atheists. I've said that for years now, okay? That is just, I believe, well, if you look at Christians, like I said, objective morality, right? We might have theological differences, but in terms of morality, it is very similar. Okay, I'm talking 90, 95, perhaps even 99% similarity with Islam, right? So I don't have a problem with Christians in that aspect. We can discuss theology, we can go over that, and we can have a discussion, and that's absolutely fine. But the problem with these Christians in the comment section is they were not doing this, right? They were not having a well-reasoned conversation. There was a lot of ad hominems, and if someone's going to throw an ad hominem, especially within their argument, you can throw it outside the argument, sort of like spice on food, you can do that. But within the argument, it just shows you're failing, frankly. I'm sorry to say, it just shows you're failing, right? You've got nothing else to attack other than either me or a certain somebody, certain religious figure, respected figure, the most respected figure in the entirety of mankind, the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that even comes from, that's not coming from me, that comes from all types of sources, that the man who had the biggest impact on the world, the modern world, the world we see today, is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Alhamdulillah, that's fantastic for us, not so fantastic for them. And yet they espouse their usual talking points. So we're going to discuss what is it that they were throwing around, frankly. What is it that they were espousing? They were talking, right, about my critique of Zionism and how the Zionists tried to push their propaganda. This came from none other than the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt. He said, and I quote, Zionist propaganda, right? His Zionist propaganda that he's pushing through his Anti-Defamation League doesn't seem to be working with the American youth. And therefore, they have a TikTok problem, right? They have a TikTok problem, and they need to solve that TikTok problem. We discussed how they're going to do that. Obviously, we're seeing that China's going to have less than 20% share in the company. And that isn't good for China, but it is good for Israel because they can control the algorithms. Because Oracle is going to control the privacy in America, is going to control the algorithms. And therefore, any of that anti-Israel content will be struck off, right? And China wasn't doing that. I'm saying that Islam resonated with the youth. Islam resonated, okay? Because it's a conservative faith. It's a well-practicing faith. There are boundaries within the faith. There is a framework from which to operate under. And Christianity seems very messy. Okay, that's what it seems, frankly. If you look at a Muslim and how he goes day by day, a Muslim will pray 5 times a day. Okay, this is not something that you can do. This is not something that you should do. This is something you have to do, right? Praying your 5 prayers every single day. If we talk about Ramadan and fasting, if we talk about giving to charity, The fact that in the UK, Muslims are 4 times more likely to give to charity than their non-Muslim counterparts. I mentioned that also in the last episode. And this guy is saying, you're essentially stating that Islam is true because it's doing well on TikTok. He's strawmanning me, essentially. And I hit him back and I say, well, actually, I'm sorry to say, my friend, you're strawmanning me. You're strawmanning me, right? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Because Islam is the truth, and that's irrespective of anything, frankly, right? If we look 20 years ago and the perception of Islam after 9/11, it was completely different, right? It was completely different, because that's really when the Zionists controlled the narratives. The Zionists controlled the narrative, and that's changed now, okay? And some Christians will actually agree with this. There are Christians who will agree with this, okay? And there, an alliance can be formed. But with these, ignoramuses, frankly, these imbeciles, these, individuals who are intellectually dishonest, right? Dishonorable, right? These are not educated individuals, I'm sorry to say. And they come at me saying, this and that, and bring up my age. Bringing up my age is not going to do any favors for you, my friend. And this is another individual. Another individual comes and he says, the reason why Islam is the fastest growing religion, the reason why Islam is doing well, right, is because of birth rates. That's it. Okay? And first and foremost, if you're going to concede on the argument of birth rates, and you're just going to say, yeah, our birth rates are low, are you going to do something about that? Because if you're not going to do something about that, that in and of itself, push everything aside, that in and of itself, you will lose. Okay? You will lose. But frankly, that's not even true. Because if we look at reversions, right, every year to Islam, it's 3 million. 3. Okay? If we look at Christianity, conversions are 2.7 million per year. So Islam has a 300,000 advantage, but it actually gets worse for the Christians, because a lot of those reversions to Islam are happening in Western, non-Muslim countries. Christian countries, maybe. It depends, right? Because it's a Western secular society. It's not ran by the church, but your far right crowd will say that the UK is a Christian country. I don't know where they get that from. I mean, there is an argument to be made that it is a Christian country, but then it is a secular liberal hegemony, frankly, right? So I don't know what side you want to be on. Probably would fall on the end that it is a liberal secular society, and that's why we are winning, because you can't do this in Islamic countries. There is very little Christianity conversions happening in Muslim countries because the Sharia acts to prevent that, okay? This is why Islam is winning, okay? Now we can discuss theology, right? We can discuss theology, theological differences. You want to believe that your God died on a cross by his own creation. You want to believe that your God was inside of his own creation, i.e. the Virgin Mary, right? Who was a very respected, perhaps the most respected woman in Islam. But we do not believe that. We believe Jesus was merely a prophet sent by God, right? And it even says this in the Bible. In the Bible, it states that Jesus cannot do anything from his own self. I, by my own self, can do nothing, right? I, by the hand of God. Why would he need to say that if he was God? I, by the hand of God, I, by my own self, can do nothing. Jesus was sent with wonders and miracles and signs through God, not through him, okay? This states it in your own text, and yet you want to argue with me? Sort out your own faith before coming to ours. Simple. There are more comments to go over, but they're all saying the same sentiment. It's all emotion and no action, and that's the problem. They're not actionable. The faith has become inactionable. There's no action going on. It's all emotion. It's all whining. It's all moaning. It's all of this, right? While the Muslims aren't just having more children, they're doing that, but they're also reverting your own.